Rooftoppers, Chapter 20, Part 1. 2 days later, Sophie sat on a bench in the Tuileries garden, fidgeting with her clothes. Her heart was hummingbirding. Matteo had sent her to sit there in the dusk and wait. I sent word, he had said. I signaled. They might come, they might not. Who was they? Sophie had watched him scrubbing the mud off snails in a pan of water. He didn't look up at her as he spoke. She had felt herself growing increasingly tight around the chest. And how long do I wait? Maybe 4 hours, starting at dusk. 4 hours, or 5 to make sure. 5! Waiting is a talent. You have to learn it. Matteo had laid each snail he cleaned upside down in front of the fire. He had a row of them. Sophie counted them, 11. Their shells were mottled and more beautiful than she had realized. Matteo said, "It's like playing the cello." "No, it's not. It will be good for you." "What do I tell Charles? I'm not allowed on the streets." "I'll get caught." Just the word caught made Sophie turn cold. "Anything. Nothing. Whatever you want. Lie to him. It doesn't matter. It will be dark." It did matter, Sophie thought, hugely. But Matteo was a rooftopper, and he had never known what it was like to have to lie to a person who loves you most. Sophie resolved to say nothing to Charles. It would be better, at any rate, than lying. And she could wear a scarf around her hair. She thought, it's my hair that they're looking out for. And she could perhaps pad out her clothes to make herself look fatter, or slouch to make herself look short. All the same, the thought made her ache with fear. She said, "Couldn't you come and keep me company?" From the look Matteo gave her, she might have asked him to eat an unplucked pigeon. "I don't go on the streets, ever." "Then couldn't we meet on my rooftop? Or yours? Otherwise I might get lost," she said. "Or caught. Please, Matteo. The police here look cruel." "No, they don't like roofs much. They like open spaces." "What do you mean? You said they were rooftoppers." "They are, sort of. Why won't you just explain?" Matteo shrugged and threw the snails into a pot of boiled broth. "You can never know who will tell. Often the ones who look safest are worst." "You think I'm going to tell?" Matteo made a face. "It'll be fine, you'll see." She had been sitting there for an hour. It hadn't been easy to get out. She had waited in her room for dusk, climbed out onto the rooftop, and shinnied down the drain pipe. She had left a note under Charles's door. "Gone to bed early, don't wake me. Love, S." The thought of him finding her gone was gnawing at her insides, and every time a man in uniform passed, she jumped and bit slithers off the inside of her mouth. Sophie looked about for something to keep her mind off policemen. The park was emptying as it grew dark, and there wasn't much to see. Only flower beds, which are boring unless you are allowed to pick the flowers, and sparrows, and beside her on the bench, a cheese roll for her dinner. She broke off a corner and tossed it at the sparrows. Behind her, a voice spoke. "That won't work. Those sparrows only eat croissant." Sophie whipped round. A girl was sitting on the back of the bench, with her feet on the seat. Her blonde hair was inches from Sophie's face. But Sophie hadn't heard a rustle, not a click, not a pigeon's whisper. "You! How did you do that? That's incredible." The girl grinned. "Good evening to you, too. You must be Sophie." She slid down to sit next to Sophie. "The birds are very spoilt round here. That's a dove that only eats pain au chocolat." She took the bread from Sophie, and instead of throwing it to the pigeons, she bit into it. "Oh, yum. Oh, heaven, I haven't had bread for weeks." "It's stale." Sophie couldn't think of anything better to say. The girl shrugged. She licked the bread to moisten it. "Stale means old, doesn't it? Old is wise. Wise bread. This is Safi, my sister. C'est bonsoir, Safi." Sophie jumped half an inch. A dark-haired girl was lolling against the bench. The girl said nothing. Sophie said, "But I didn't hear you. How did you do that?" The first girl shrugged. "Practice." The dark girl came and sat on the bench, tight-rolled, almost in her sister's lap. A clock chimed, and a man began to light the street lamps. For the first time, Sophie could see them clearly. Both were small and filthy. The blonde wore a cotton dress. It was greenish-brown, but, judging by the stitching, Sophie guessed it had once been white. It looked as if someone had deliberately smeared it with grass stains. A beetle was clinging to the hem. Somehow, the girl made it look like the richest Chinese silk. "I'm Anastasia," she said. Her accent was odd. Sophie thought it was French, but there was an odd twang to the vowels. The girl spread out her arms as though she owned the place. "Welcome to Paris." "Thank you. I'm Sophie." "Yes, we established that," said Anastasia. She laid her hand on the arm of her sister. "Sophie says welcome also." The dark-haired girl had the face of someone who had seen a lot and wouldn't mind punching most of it. She wore a boy's shirt and a man's pair of trousers, held up at the waist with measuring tape tied in a knot. She had something sticky smeared up one cheek, which might or might not have been blood. but beneath it she was as beautiful as the blonde. Sophie winced with jealousy. The blonde girl smiled. Matteo said you would be easy to spot. Look out for the eyes, the colour of candlelight, he said. Matteo told you? Of course, who else? Sophie narrowed her eyes. How did he tell you? We signal with candles, you know. Morse code, you call it? Shush, just for a second. She looked Sophie up and down, and then jumped up and circled her to view her from the back, all without any apparent worry of being rude. Sophie tried to keep her face blank.